Hello and welcome back to the Honest Business Podcast. I hope you are very, very well. I'm so glad you're joining me today. Whether this is the first episode that you've ever listened to, welcome. There's so much for you to dive into. Or whether you are a regular listener, welcome. I appreciate you being here. Today is a good episode. We need to talk about this because I think everybody wants to be ethical or fair, or most people who listen to this do, but there's also a very complex kind of makeup of this. So let's dive into it. Today we're talking about pricing. How can you be ethical? How can you be fair? You want to be, a decent price. You don't want to rip people off. Let's just talk about this. This isn't going to be a step by step at the end of it. You're going to know what your pricing is. That's not what this is. This is a conversation about how do we figure out what this means for you. And I think it's a really important topic because the impact of this and what you do from this affects how your business grows, how much profit it makes, how much you take home, who you look after, what you can do in the world. This has wide implications, which is why it's super important and it needs to be talked about. So people will say, and often people are ashamed into believing that they haven't got ethical pricing or that they need this bloody term that's been chucked around of ethical pricing. So let's just think about what is ethical pricing as the first thing. What does ethical fair pricing mean to you? It's going to mean different things to different people. One thing I would like to say off the top of this episode is, if you are in business, you are a business. If you are not a charity or a not-for-profit or any other category that sits under a business, then those are two separate things. And some people run a business, but they think it's a charity, or the way that they approach it, they think they're a shit business owner and they fail at it, when actually what they're trying to do is run a not-for-profit organisation, but then they kind of want to benefit from it themselves, and it all becomes very mixed up and entangled together. So first up, I want you to think about, how do you approach business? Have you been approaching it as a kind of charity owner or as someone who is creating a not-for-profit business? And I also want to say, there's nothing wrong with either of those, right? We love charities, we love not-for-profits. If you decide from this, maybe you're like, fuck, I want to have a non-for-profit, bloody go for it. That's great. There's no issue with either or, but there is an issue in terms of how you price and how you make things happen and how your business moves forward, or what it does and doesn't achieve based on this. So, ethical pricing. First up, I would argue there ain't a definition for it. But I think what most people are referring to is they want a fair exchange of value, time, of the two parties involved. So there's somebody delivering something, or there's someone giving something to someone who is buying something, and you want that to be fair and ethical. You don't want to rip someone off. You don't want to overcharge them. The issue we have with this concept as a whole is that most people who are panicked about this are hugely, and I can't stress this enough, hugely undercharging already. Or not undercharging, but are at such a kind of low level point of where they could be in the sense of pricing, that this becomes very difficult, because sometimes people are charging one amount, they want to drop it to a certain amount, and I'm sat there going, hang on a minute, how the hell is your business going to work and function and grow or move to what you're trying to do from a vision and mission perspective if you keep your pricing at a certain point? Or worse off, they're going to reduce it. And this is not me shaming anyone, okay? I don't want this to come across as me being like, oh, you should have knew this, and oh, this is so bad. I'm just passionate about it because I think it's such a misunderstood topic. I think people spout off all sorts of bizarre conversations around it. I think people are scared into thinking that they charge too much. I think people are tortured into believing that they have to, if they charge a certain amount, that they're unethical, and that there's this thing and that thing, and people are going to talk shit about them. And I really know that this comes from a really activated place for people. This is a topic that is so layered and nuanced, and privilege is written into it, and so much is inside of this. So I know that this is not an easy topic for people, but I want you to really think about, what does ethical mean to you when it comes to pricing? What does fair pricing mean? And I've done 2 pieces of work recently with amazing women on this who run really amazing businesses, and came to me and said, I don't think the value, well, they knew, sorry, it's not even a thing. They were like, the value that we give to people is not what we're charging. So we know, they kind of knew that they needed to charge more, but then they were kind of like, Does that fit with who we're serving? And they were kind of like, it was like a really explorative piece of work. And the result of that was we created the piece of work, we had the discussion, we worked through the things, we found a new normal, we found something that felt really ethical and fair to them, and then they're in the process of implementing, and then they're tweaking and going along with it as they move forward. Needless to say, what I'm trying to come back to is this idea of, what does fair pricing look like and mean to you? What I would say, I think, let's just go with things we can all agree on. I think that when you have ethical and fair pricing in your business, you sell more. As in the act of selling. I'm not saying you make more money. I'm saying you are more prepared to share what it is you do, whether that's on social media, whether that's in person, whether that's through some kind of sales process. Most people, if they're happy with their pricing, they will stand up and share and talk more openly about what it is that they have on offer. So therefore, having ethical and fair pricing is really important, because often if I'm trying to help grow a business and I'm giving people step-by-steps if I need them to take, or suggesting that they might want to take, if the pricing piece is off, the likelihood of them actioning all the other stuff is second to zero, really. I mean, it's not going to happen because they're not aligned with it. So for me, like, having fair and ethical pricing also comes down to, what are you aligned with? What are you prepared to believe into? Business is a self-belief game. Business is a game of, how can you communicate? How can you know that you're really shit hot at what you're offering people? How do you know that that's an amazing product? If you're not bought into that at whatever price that you're potentially going to charge, it's kind of game over. So I need people to be on board with, we're going to charge X amount because that feels good for X, Y, Z reasons. And also is underneath that, built on a basis of a lot of projection and understanding and analysis of, that's why we're charging X, Y, and Z thing. When you think about this topic, hopefully if you're listening to this, you're kind of feeling either a bit excited, or you're kind of sat there thinking, she's actually making sense here. Like, I do get that I need to change. So maybe there's going to be sort of a few camps. What ultimately we need for you to do is to fall in love with your pricing. So I need you to be in love with how much you're charging. And that's not me saying that you need to be in love because it's the cheapest thing ever. In fact, please don't aim to be the cheapest at what you do. If you're listening to this, it ain't going to work. If you have got millions and millions of pounds in investment, and you're going to have stakeholders all over the world, and you're going to build all sorts of tech, great, fine. Go and be the cheapest in the world, because you'll probably be able to do it. But most people listening to this haven't got a cat and hell's chance of being able to make that happen. And the quicker you believe that, and the quicker you understand it, and the quicker you then work to aid yourself with that, the better it's going to get for you. Because you are destined setting yourself up to fail if you are just going to say, I want to be the cheapest, I want to do this, I want to offer this, blah, blah, blah. Like, I really get where it comes from. I really get the desire. I really get that you want to be X, Y, and Z in the world. Like, I totally, and I really feel like, I don't feel like it sounds very authentic when I'm sat here saying, but like, I really do understand what it is you're saying, because I've been there myself. Like, I totally get what you want to do. But I'm also really requesting that you think about your business, and you think about the world in which you're serving, and how business works, and how economies of scale works, and how the economy works, and really think about, what is it that you actually want to create. And this is why, for a lot of people, the way that they can make the impact they want to make is through building a community, is through building their brand, is through content, is through free resource. That is where you can get your hit of whatever the hit is that you're trying to get from charging, really ethically. But again, coming back to this idea, we ain't saying that ethical pricing means low pricing. That is not what I'm saying at all. Ethical pricing is about a fairness, it's about a value exchange, and it's about something that is appropriate from one thing to another. And that is so important, because actually so many of you might already have, and I think will have, ethical and fair pricing in their business. You give somebody something, they're paying you X amount, that is a fair exchange. Now, you can argue, depends how much you want to buy into this, right? I'd argue money is energy. It's an exchange. It's an energetic exchange. And that is also really important to remember. Because as somebody who, I'm someone who we will give free spots away on certain things. Like every year with Year of Clarity, I have a piece on the sales page that says, like, if you want to join this but you can't, blah, blah, blah. I'm not going to go into the ins and outs, but like, I'm in a space where I will try and help people, right? But I am also in the space of seeing and trying to measure and impact measure what that does for people. And I can categorically tell you that it is very rare that that is going to work as an aid of, moving social mobility or switching things. Because the reality of it is there is a huge, vast amount of information and education available for people, but that's not necessarily always the issue. Don't get me wrong, that's still important. I will always advocate for free education. I'm always going to advocate for having scholarships and free things and yada yada. But energetic transaction is important, and money is one of the most powerful ways of people doing that. And so, really understanding how can I fall in love with my pricing that is fair for both parties. One of the things you need to do in order to be able to do that is for you to fully understand the finances behind your business and what it would look like if it got to the point in which you wanted to get to. This is the piece of work I spend a lot of time with people doing, like a half day or a full day strategy day, streamline your strategy, anything around that is where we spend time doing this. Because some people, you might know this already, but other people, you might have not actually fully understood. If the vision that you're trying to achieve as a business or the mission that you're on, if you actually get to that point, what is the cost of the business? Because that has to come into it when you're thinking about your pricing. Now, moving on to this conversation around, I'm just going to try and get a bit more practical with you. If you're sat here now thinking, right, okay, I get this, fair enough, what do we actually practically need to do, May? The first thing you need to think about is, who is your customer? Actually understanding them goes a long way in figuring out how to create ethical and fair pricing. And I'm going to use an example that's really important to hopefully demonstrate this. If you are servicing corporate businesses, or you're servicing a business that, has hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands of employees, ethical and fair pricing is not charging 100 quid an hour for your time. No way. Just point blank no. For some people, even charging £3,000 for a 45-minute workshop, for some companies, still, I'd argue, is not ethical and fair pricing. It completely depends on a whole variety of factors relating to what the service is. And so this is why, I think this is also why people can't get their heads around how much people get paid sometimes to do things. And people will jump to conclusions, assumptions, judgment around certain people earning X amount of money in a certain amount of time. And they just don't get how pricing works. They don't get how value exchange works. They don't understand that it's not about the money necessarily. So really understand who your customer is important. Because if I'm trying to create an ethical and fair pricing strategy for someone who serves corporate businesses versus someone who is serving small businesses who are just starting out, who have a full-time job, or maybe don't have a full-time job and are currently unemployed, those two strategies are going to be so different, even if it was a similar service. So understanding who your customer is really important. It's also exciting because it also means you can be strategic about who you're picking. Did a piece of work with someone recently who has ever so slightly moved, and we had this discussion of, can we move that slightly, still keeping a certain group of stakeholders, but they're also adding and kind of stepping into a different piece. And they know that it then means that this new piece that they're kind of expanding on can aid the ethical fair pricing for the other section of people. So the other segmentation of clients, the business can then work together if there's two different segments, right? So this isn't about you having to pick a certain industry or a certain place to exist in, but it's about you being strategic in it. And again, going back to this whole thing around, are you building a business? Are you building a charity? Are you building this yada yada yada, right? Thinking about, where does those lines get blurred? Often it's to do with who the customer actually is. That's where it gets blurred all the time. I have numerous conversations with people around, this is how much I want to charge, or this is how much I am charging. But are they going to pay that? Or are they going to enjoy that? Or will they think it's this and that? And it's like, hang on, it needs to be strategic, but it comes down to who your customer actually is. This is also not me saying that if you're serving small business owners, you can't charge a lot. That's not what I'm saying at all. But I'm just trying to get you to think about who is your customer, because that will be the basis of how you then move forward with your ethical pricing. The other thing is, you have got to try and figure out and acknowledge how warped your understanding of money and pricing truly is. And let's just be honest, right? I don't know how warped my perception of money and pricing is, because we never fully understand what the true opportunity is that is available to us, okay? So, and if you are like me and have come from not an entrepreneurial family, you've come from, a working class background where money is not a thing that there was a lot of. You're not something that people are flashing around. It's not something that was a thing. Your perception of that is so kind of closed off and guarded, because why would you if you haven't been exposed? And I'm saying this from experience, right? This has been a journey for me over the last however many years, like many years, of me pulling at and finding and getting through doors and knocking on things and saying, like, is this real? Is this happening? Like, what's happening here? Of understanding what money means in the world, what it looks like, how much money there is available. Most of us just don't know, right? We don't know because we haven't had that privilege. We haven't been afforded that. But what I'm suggesting today is that you acknowledge that and you say, do you know what? I don't know how warped my understanding of money and pricing is. And what we see is projection. Projection happens all the time when people are in this space, okay? People have judgments around how much women, especially women, this is how the whole issue with women comes about, of how much money women are earning. People, this hourly rate is X, that's disgusting, that's so unethical, that's a scam, blah, blah. People are so, they don't know any better, because they don't know that actually, charging, and again, I'm trying not to use numbers because this really gets very complicated, but let's just say, for example, you charge, I don't know, £1,200 an hour for your time. Some people are going to have various opinions on that. But what they don't understand is, someone who does the same thing as you is also getting paid £5,000 for the same hour, or £10,000 for the same hour. And I think people listening to this might sit there and go, that's not actually happening, mate. And I'm really wanting to say to you, it is. You are just not accustomed to it. You haven't seen it. You're not in the room where that's happening. But money is getting exchanged every single day at a rate that you have probably got no clue about. And again, I'm saying, I also don't. You expand your understanding, and you expand your understanding again, and you expand it again. But at all the times, there's never an endpoint, right? So all the times, you're never really fully getting how much money is out there and how much people are paying for things. And so when you start figuring out, and once you're exposed to, and once you start seeing how much people are actually getting paid to do certain things, you then start to realize it's way more than you probably think it is. And you then start realizing that people who are charging that amount of money, most of these people are not unethical people, right? Yes, you're always going to have some. You're always going to have some people that scam people. But most people, if they're charging £5,000 an hour, often it's because the value exchange that they're exchanging is worth that to whoever is buying it. And this is where lack of education really is strong. Lack of understanding in society about money and talking about money is strong, because there is a real disconnect of what that means for people. And if you're sat there thinking, I don't understand how that can be ethical, let's just do an example. Say you go and charge someone £5,000 for 60 minutes of your time. In that 60 minutes of your time, you can diagnose someone's problem and give them a solution. That solution can then go on to, I don't know, change that person's life forever. That would be classed as worth it to the person who's buying it, potentially. That's a fair and ethical exchange. Let's just say they spend £5,000 on 60 minutes of someone's time, solved the problem, diagnosed the problem, really figured out what the next steps were, gave them it. Person then goes and makes, I don't know, £10,000 in their business, £100,000 in their business, £200,000 in their business within a year, 5 months, 5 weeks, 5 days. Depending on that person, that will be 100% worth that money. Because it's a value exchange and it's a value proposition. This is why I talk all the time about being really bloody good at what you do, because that will serve you for the rest of your life. For some of you in your head, you're going to say, well, it would never be worth £5,000 for 60 minutes because I'm never going to pay it. That's fine. That's your own issue to deal with in your head. But there's plenty of people who will. My health, for example, my chronic illness. If someone turned around to me and said, right, £5,000, see me for 20 minutes, but I've got this solution, or here's a drug that, would fix me. Do you know how quickly I'd pay that £5,000? Like, I don't care. I don't care if it gets me a holiday. I don't care if it's 6 hours. I don't care. If that was there, I'd take it, and that person would change my life. I'd be forever indebted to them, and it would be the best money I'd ever spent. Sadly, that doesn't exist for my condition yet, but maybe it will eventually one day. But the money isn't the issue, right? The energetic exchange of what that would have done for me, or what that means to me, and what that signifies is so, so huge. And so I really want to encourage you to think about detaching from the money. Now, this episode isn't going to change everything for you, right? This stuff is deep-rooted. It's stuff that you've got to do a lot of work around. It's a constant journey. You're never at an end point. It's constant. But I'm really hoping this episode might be challenging your thoughts. It might be changing your perspective. It might be thinking, oh, actually, yeah, the reason I say this about people, or the reason I project this negative thought around so-and-so earning money is actually because I don't believe it's possible for me. Or I don't actually see that playing out in my life. Or I've never seen that be true. Or the only examples I have seen is people being scam artists, or that they're really bad, or they're this, or they're that. And I'm just inviting you today to expand your emotional intelligence, to expand your world and say, I'm going to dive into this because actually this is really interesting. So ethical and fair pricing comes down to, I would argue, who you're serving, what the value add is. It's not about what people get, as in what the deliverables are. People get really het up on that. It's not about what the deliverables are. There's also a huge piece of this that we haven't yet discussed, and I've purposely kept it until the end because I know it's the piece that people really disconnect, or not disconnect, but they struggle to buy into sometimes the most. And that is that if you undercharge, that is the most unethical and unfair thing you can do for yourself. And so many business owners are doing this, okay? If you are undercharging, then you are therefore being unethical and unfair towards yourself. And that is not acceptable, okay? Forget changing the world. Forget whoever you want to help in your community. Forget all the other shit that you want to do. That's really important stuff and beautiful and great. You have to look after yourself first. And for most people, that means they have to look after their business in order for the business to then look after the person that is you. If you don't do that, you're being unethical and unfair to yourself. And that plays out a lot because people don't value themselves. Their self-worth is on the floor. Their, value of where they're going to win in life is so skewed. And I really want you to think about that. Like, make a list of what is ethical and fair and what isn't. Like, list out characteristics, behaviors, examples of this is not ethical and not fair. On that list needs to be not looking after myself first, not being able to provide for myself. Again, if you're building a charity or a not-for-profit, this is a separate conversation, right? Because the purpose of the charity and not-for-profit is not to support you. That's where most charities and non-profit go wrong, if people set things up because they're going to support themselves and then help others. So maybe this episode you're realising, I need to start a charity and not-for-profit because these two things are separate things, and that's fine. That's okay if that's what you get to. I'm also not saying, by the way, that you can't help people and change people's lives and have a really profitable business. That's I'm hoping it's the opposite of what I'm trying to say. Like, you can 100% do that. But what I'm saying is like, people are prepared to pay decent money so that you have enough money to be able to look after yourself whilst you're helping other people. And if you're doing that but not charging enough for yourself, you're doing a disservice to yourself, but it's also not really helping the world. Because we need more women and we need more people who are prepared to show up in the world and who are able to actually look after themselves first and to know themselves and to be self-aware and to look inside before they start projecting out. This topic is the ultimate test of projection, understanding of human behavior, understanding leadership, understanding where it's your place to say something and where it isn't. Like, that's not me saying you shouldn't speak on if you see unethical practice. That's not what I'm saying at all. Like, speak on it as much as you want. But what I'm saying about is you need to check with yourself of, is something unethical? Or are you just not yet there yet? Have you not figured that out? Is your emotional intelligence not there? Is your knowledge not there? Maybe you didn't realise that. Please don't feel guilty as well. If you listened to this episode and thought, shit, you know what, actually, I've spent so many years of my life shaming people or projecting this opinion or making this comment, and actually, I just didn't know any better, or I wasn't that educated, or my emotional intelligence wasn't there. That's okay. But we're going to move forward from that. I really hope this episode has stirred something inside of you. It might be that you sat there thinking, do you know what, actually, my pricing's great, I don't need to do anything, it feels really good. Fine. If that's what you got from that episode, great. But this is such a key topic. And if you're now sat there thinking, okay, I do need to change because either I'm undercharging or I'm overcharging or the value exchange isn't fair, like I'm charging them £2,000, but actually I know that the value they add for their business is so massive that actually it needs to be a bit more fairer for me, that's where I can help you. And that's where you can come and you can work with me. And this sort of work works really well with a half-day intensive or like streamline your strategy or a full day with me, where we will sit down and we will figure out what is ethical and fair for both parties. This is never about you just ripping people off, because that's not what we're into. We're never into that. Like, that's not right. And the other thing I wanted to end this episode on is a really important piece, okay? And people ask me about this a lot, so I think it's important to share. What you do from this point, when you have ethical and fair pricing, one thing that it removes is resentment from your business. Some of you will know, I advise and I sit in, if some people want to have me inside their business, I'm sort of almost like a fractional team member, and I'm there to advise them and coach them and consult for them, and I'll do a variety of different things for them. And some of that involves them doubling their businesses. Maybe they're growing their business rapidly. Some of the lovely businesses that I've worked with for a number of years now, they have gone from a certain point in revenue and they've massively changed that. And they're now, a 7-figure business, for example. Somebody asks, like, I often get asked, do you feel resentment? It's not resentment, but they'll ask about, they know that I don't take any equity share. I don't take any percentage of like revenue, profit, growth, any of that stuff. I never, ever feel resentment, feel frustration, feel like, oh, well, I made that happen and that must be nice for them because they've now made all that money, and like any of that conversation. I can't even think about the examples because it never crosses my mind, but I totally get what people are asking. I totally get what they're saying. Like, they're saying like I think they're kind of saying like, oh, well, if it was your business, then you'd now be this much better off. And that just does not cross my mind. But the reason it doesn't cross my mind is because my pricing is ethical and fair. It's reasonable, yeah? It does not matter to me if someone then goes and makes say they have like a strategy day with me, they go make £1 million. I am like the happiest person for them because it's bloody great. And it's, a testament to the work we do, and it's testament to their implementation. It's not me that is going to do that. It's their implementation. But, great for their strategy and for their growth and their support. But I have charged a price that is fair to me, that is ethical to me, that I am comfortable with, that it doesn't matter to me whether they've made X amount of money or X amount of money, because I know that the value I give is representative of that amount that I've charged. And I cannot tell you the freedom that brings for you. I cannot tell you the stability that brings, the calmness. Like, this is so important. I really can't stress it enough of what this does for how I then can behave in business and who I work with. Because it also means my intention's there, right? And this is why I keep saying ethical and fair pricing needs to be ethical and fair to you. Because imagine if it wasn't for me. Imagine if I charged like I don't know, say I charge 500 quid and someone for like loads of hours of work and I like tore myself into the ground for it, and they then did amazingly well, I would feel resentment. I'd feel really like, oh, that's annoying. Like, I'd feel frustrated. But I don't, because I don't charge that. And I charge an amount that is good for me. And also, when I'm saying about the value you add, it's not that it's like a magical percentage. It's not that you're like, oh, well, if someone makes X amount of money from that, then you have to charge X, because that doesn't work. Because many of you are selling stuff that isn't money based, right? You're helping people have amazing relationships. You're helping them not be stressed. You're helping them have more time. Like, there's so many things that we can't quantify with money. So it's not about how much money are people making from what it is that you're doing. It's just about how do you make sure that that value exchange is fair. And in order for me to be able to do my job well and for me to be ethical in my practice in terms of who I am as a professional, I have to make sure that pricing's right, because it is unethical and unprofessional and not correct of me to charge a price where I would then resent the result, or I would then feel left out, or I would then feel like, oh, that's really not fair. Like, none of that comes up for me because the pricing's down as to like, that's a fair exchange. And so, and I will say is, you will feel that in your gut. Like, if you do not have ethical and fair pricing, you will feel the resentment in your gut, even if you don't want to admit it. You will feel a like, oh, well, I didn't really want to do that, but I've done it now, and it didn't feel great. And so many people come to me and say this. They're like, I took this piece of work on, it was under what I normally take, or the budget wasn't as big as we normally would take on, and it's been a nightmare, or it feels like, oh, I just want to get rid of it. I want to get on to the next thing. Like, that's such a real, true lived emotion for so many business owners. And there's a whole other conversation of, sometimes you got to take on work that you don't want to do, maybe. Sometimes you're in a position where the business needs cash flow. Like, I'm not sat here like some sort of queen saying, you've got to do everything that's, in alignment with whatever. Business happens, real life happens. What I'm saying is you will understand yourself better. And I would argue you will be a better professional at what it is that you do if your pricing is ethical and fair to both parties, to all of the stakeholders involved. That is all for today's episode. I have enjoyed this episode talking to you. I really, really hope you take something from this. I feel like this is a really important episode. Like, share this with people you know, because more and more people need to be having this conversation and really figuring this conversation out in their own heads. I'm sending you tons and tons of love. Feel free to leave a review. I'd love for you to leave a review wherever you get your podcast. Drop me a comment, give us a 5 stars, like whatever you need to do. Please give us a review or share on socials. Love for you to share on socials and maybe share your points or your takeaways or what you liked about it. And I will be back next week for another episode. You've got over 100 different episodes to listen to now, so feel free to jump in. And we also now have playlists created. So we spent some time when we hit the 100 episode mark diving into creating 8 curated playlists for you on a selection of different business topics. They are free for you to get involved with. You just go to www.mayjames.com/playlists. You can pop your email in. We will send you an email. It has 8 of the different playlists that you can click on, that you can consume, and they have all been created with topics around certain areas of business, because I know now there's so many episodes, it's a bit overwhelming if you're trying to look for something specific. So we've got things like team, sales, building a sustainable business, growth strategy. We've got all sorts of different topics for you to look at and to dive into. That is all for me today. I will speak to you very soon. Take care. Bye.